Picture the exact second it happens. A polite smile stretches across your face, your hand is still warm from the greeting, and the label that belongs to the human being standing directly in front of you has completely evaporated into thin air. You aren't just drawing a blank. The slate has been wiped clean, shattered, and swept away. What follows is a quiet, desperate mental scramble. You nod enthusiastically, construct carefully vague sentences avoiding proper nouns, and pray to whatever deity will listen that someone else joins the circle and says their name out loud to save you. It is universally excruciating. Yet, if you are someone who constantly finds themselves trapped in this specific social nightmare, you have likely internalized a quiet, heavy assumption that you are simply scatterbrained, secretly self-absorbed, or lacking a fundamental social intelligence that everyone else seems to possess naturally. But you are none of those things. The chronic inability to retain names does not point to a deficit in empathy. In fact, it points to a highly specific cognitive architecture, and once you realize what your mind is actually doing in those moments, the shame completely dissipates. Let us break down the exact anatomy of an introduction. When a stranger walks up to you, your brain does not view this as a casual encounter. It views it as a complex, high-stakes computation. In a fraction of a second, your prefrontal cortex is interpreting body language, decoding microexpressions, assessing social hierarchies, and frantically drafting the next appropriate thing for you to say. Your mental bandwidth is stretched to its absolute maximum capacity, and right at the peak of this intense neurological processing, the person drops a single disconnected piece of data into the machine: a name. To your brain, this word is practically meaningless. It holds no sensory weight, carries no emotional resonance, and lacks any contextual anchor. It is a loose thread floating in a hurricane. But why do you drop the thread more frequently than others? Individuals who habitually lose names almost universally share one distinct psychological trait: a profoundly hyperactive internal monologue driven by social anticipation. While the other person is speaking, you're not simply receiving information, you're internally producing a documentary about the interaction. You are analyzing the firmness of your handshake, wondering if your eye contact is too intense, evaluating if you're talking too much, or rehearsing your next sentence so you don't sound foolish. Psychologists recognize this as a form of cognitive flooding. The name enters your auditory cortex, but the processing power required to encode it into short-term memory has already been hijacked by your own self-monitoring. You are quite literally too deeply engaged in the subtext of the interaction to record the text. You don't have a bad memory, you have an overactive awareness. Furthermore, chronic name forgetters tend to possess deeply associative memories. Your mind operates like a vast web of context and emotion, not a sterile filing cabinet of facts. You are the exact kind of person who will perfectly recall the specific cadence of a stranger's laugh, the surprisingly profound observation they made about their childhood, or the precise shade of blue they were wearing 3 years ago at a crowded dinner party. Your brain ruthlessly prioritizes human texture over administrative data. Names are inherently administrative. They are semantic placeholders assigned at birth. The reason you forget the placeholder is that your brain is entirely consumed with absorbing the actual person. When you ask an associative thinker to remember a name under social pressure, it's like asking a poet to instantly memorize a randomized sequence of barcode numbers. The mental machinery is simply built for a different kind of task. Naturally, this neurological reality does not completely erase the social friction. For the person whose name was forgotten, the experience can feel mildly dismissive. We are culturally conditioned to link the retention of our names to the metric of our personal worth. When someone forgets what we are called, our immediate instinct is to assume we failed to make an impression. It feels like a subtle erasure. But the irony is that the person who forgot your name was often the one who paid the most intense attention to how you made them feel. They might not remember the letters arranged on your driver's license, but they remember the atmosphere you brought into the room. Understanding this mechanism doesn't mean you shouldn't try to build better cognitive bridges. Repeating the name out loud instantly, anchoring it to a visual cue, or intentionally pausing your internal monologue for 2 seconds can manually force your brain to do what it refuses to do automatically. You can build the mental infrastructure, but it is entirely time to discard the lingering guilt. You are not a careless person moving blindly through a world of strangers. You are simply navigating social spaces with a mind that prioritizes the music over the lyrics. The label was always the most superficial part of the exchange anyway. What you actually capture, the emotional resonance, the human depth, the real substance of an encounter, that remains perfectly intact. And if you appreciate this kind of exploration into the human mind, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next upload.